Making a Happy Meal with Ronald and Friends.
For years, you've known us for our clown.
So you clicked on a video about hamburgers and clowns. I bet you thought this whole video was going to be about Ronald McDonald. Well, what if I told you that Ronald McDonald was not the first clown to advertise hamburgers? Nor was he the last. So if you want to get into this interesting history and why we associate hamburgers with clowns, order up, let's get into it. Honk honk, it's Bouncy here. So the story actually starts out in the 50s with the popularization of the circus. Now, the circus was something that used to fall in and out of popularity, but the reason why the circus was becoming so popular once again in the 50s was actually because of the movies. So in the 50s, starting in like 1952, The Greatest Show on Earth would come out. And then right after The Greatest Show on Earth would come out, you would have other titles. Like for instance, Man on a Trapeze in 1953. And both Three Ring Circus and A Carnival Story in 1954. And that's really just to name a few. So because the circus was finally getting its time on the big screen, I do believe that this is where the story really starts. People saw clowns in the circus as more glamorous than ever before, but they also recognized certain clowns. And Ringling used this to their advantage. Ringling would do a lot of different advertisements with advertising companies, and they would use their clowns. So they would have their clowns go out and do these advertisements, and it would all be under Ringling's name, which is actually why so many clowns remain uncredited for their work in advertisements, because they were actually doing the advertisements through the circuses that they worked for. And this wasn't just Ringling, by the way, but it's a good example. So they were actually just doing this through the circuses that they worked for, and they were not credited as the clown that they were performing as or as the person behind the clown. It was more just like Ringling Clowns or just clowns, and people were like, oh, we know where that's from, or that person looks familiar. So nobody ever actually got correctly credited. They were just credited through their circus, which I guess is kind of similar to like how we are with modeling agencies. Sometimes modeling agencies get credited and not the model. So it was kind of like that.
Armor Frank's Red Dot Potato Chips, Double Bubble, Big Top Circus Nuts, various brands of popcorn, Dr. Pepper, Canada Dry, and even Minute Maid Juice all ran ads in the 50s featuring clowns or just clown cartoon mascots. Most notably in 1950, Nabisco would use circus clowns to advertise their cookies, and in 1953, Heinz 57 would use circus clowns to advertise their different condiments. This would be the catalyst for clowns and hamburgers.
So not only that, but the circus definitely had turned over a new leaf. And when I say that, I just mean that circuses went from being something that was like very adult focused. Not a lot of people know that. Very adult focused, very devious, into something that was more for family because they needed to make money and people were becoming more family focused. So what better way to make money than to become a family thing? So now clowns had done this kind of flip-flop. They were seen as adult, entertainers. Then they were seen as a little bit more romantic in the movies. And then now they were kind of for children. They were in advertising and kids liked them. And this was something that was once again taken advantage of by advertisers. And this would actually overlap with something else that was going on in America, the rise of fast food. The 50s brought us a lot of fast food giants like McDonald's, KFC, Hardee's, and even Dairy Queen. But there was one fast food giant that beat them all to the punch when it came to advertising fast food and clowns.
In 1951, Jack in the Box would enter the mascot ring with Jack, who, yes, is a clown. When Jack first debuted, his clown persona was much more noticeable. Over time, he'd become what we know now, which is sort of like a ping-pong-headed version of what he once was. But Jack in the Box was a clown long before McDonald's entered the scene.
Most people don't know this, but the Jack in the Box itself dates way, way far back. I mean, I'm pretty sure it's even before the 1500s, but there used to be a character inside the Jack in the Box that was called a Jack, and this was like a devious devil character that was known for being a trickster, and it did share a little bit of its aesthetics with jesters, but its history is its own thing, so I won't go into all of that here. However, Jack in the Boxes had this trickster, type of character inside of them, and this Jack character would like pop up and scare you because you never ever knew when he was going to like stop and pop out with the music. And this became synonymous with clowns later on. So that's how Jack in the Boxes and clowns became linked. So the Jack in the Box clown is a clown, and it was way before Ronald. And I think that's really interesting. So Jack in the Box did it first. And I, for one, feel like Jack in the Box needs to get back in their clown era, because right now, Jack just looks weird. Like, what even are you? I've always thought he looked weird. And when you see him as a clown, it's like, okay, that makes way more sense than whatever the heck that was. From here, it really wasn't much of a stretch that a lot of burger joints caught on to the popularity of clowns, and it's literally, you can draw a straight line through it. Like, you got clowns being popular at the movies, those clowns advertising foods, and then those clowns advertising specific foods that kids would eat at the circus because they were striking all these deals. You've got clowns advertising Heinz 57, you've got clowns advertising literally everything. It's not too much of a stretch to think, okay, clowns were advertising ingredients, what if they just advertise the whole thing? And that's kind of where you get so many of these clown hamburger businesses popping up. So it started with Jack in the Box in 1951, but it continued on.
With Puppy's opening 1 year later than Jack in the Box in 1952, this burger joint was really popular for a short time in Michigan and some surrounding areas. Next up would be a location known as Tastyburger, one word, credited as Tastyburger Systems in Ohio. This place was originally opened in 1948, and I'm unable to document when exactly they started implementing their clown mascot, but I was able to find evidence that it existed because of an eBay listing for some matches that they used to give out. Unfortunately, the reason why I couldn't find much history about this restaurant is because it was embroiled in a racist controversy. You see, they actually fired a waitress named Jacqueline Irene Wooden because they found out that the woman was mixed race. This led to the NAACP organizing marches against them and picketing them in 1963.
I wanted to include this story because honestly there wasn't a lot of information about it out there, and because I think that it is a realistic depiction of what life was actually like for people in this time frame while all this was happening. Like, there was still segregation and racial issues, and I was like, wow, I've literally never heard this story before, so I wanted to include it so that I could kind of paint a more realistic idea of how the world actually was in spite of all these fun, happy, clown mascots. And I know it might like interrupt like the fun, silly, countdown and kind of like history we're talking about, but it's also history. And I'm kind of the type of person where I believe we should just talk about history, and the facts are the facts. So that's the facts. There was a clown themed hamburger restaurant that legitimately fired somebody because they were mixed race, and then they were protested against, rightfully so. And now the history is literally buried. So eventually in 1957, Bozo would emerge into popularity. And Bozo does predate 1957, but the reason why 1957 is important is this is when Bozo became syndicated. And what that means is that there's all different kinds of Bozos for all different kinds of TV stations. And that might be why different people remember different Bozos, or why there's so many different Bozo actors. There were Bozos for all different kinds of regions. And it's kind of interesting, and I think that is actually part of why Bozo became so loved and such a huge figure in like clowning and clown history, because there was more than one Bozo. In the same way there's also like more than one Ronald, so it's kind of like interesting how that happened. And then because clowning was just so popular in general, like Bozo also was like not the only TV clown. There were so many TV clowns that there's like a huge chunk of them that are legitimately lost media. Like there's entire catalogs of TV clowns out there. You cannot find like evidence that they existed besides photos or like newspaper articles. Like, it's really interesting. TV clowning was taking off big time in the 1950s, especially the late 1950s. And we had already seen clowns advertising to kids, clowns with hamburgers, and now even more so, kids were sitting down and watching clowns right on their screen for the first time ever. They didn't have to go to a movie to see a clown. They didn't have to buy a product to see a clown. They could sit down at home, boom, and see a clown, which for clowning was also pretty revolutionary. And clowning did change and evolve as TV clowning entered the scene, kind of like how clowning has changed a lot, that the internet has entered the scene. So it's really interesting how clowning actually does evolve as humanity continues to have different technologies. And of course, advertisers were locked in, and they were like, oh, you're gonna be a TV clown? You're gonna say your name out there? What a great opportunity to actually get you to sell sell our stuff. And once again, clowning and food met up to do some more advertising. So it was kind of like this whole ripple effect. Clowns were in the movies, then clowns were advertising food, then clowns were on TV and they were advertising food again. And then the people that were smart were like, hey, I make food. You should advertise for me. It's like kind of like a marriage of things that they thought would sell at the time.
While all this was happening in the mid to late 50s, Clown Burger would open its location in 1959, 15 minutes from Fort Worth, Texas, in a town called Haltom City. The business actually still stands today, and so does its iconic sign. Even its mural would actually go through a restoration. Following Clown Burger, Burger Boy Foodorama would have their own clown mascot, Mr. Happy, in 1961, a full 2 years before Ronald McDonald himself. Mr. Happy was popular enough to even have his own merchandise, including a doll. As more burger joints were opening and advertising clowns, some even invited real, actual clowns to meet guests at their local burger joints. So for instance, this ad for Herfy's, which celebrated its opening in 1962, had a local clown advertised named Bob Bo that you could actually go meet at the opening, which makes sense as clowns were more popular than ever, and real-life work, including event work, was the main draw for clowns at the time. It was a really good way to make money, besides a place like the Circus or a birthday party. In 1963, the burger clown giant of all giants would enter the ring, as McDonald's would change mascots from their iconic Speedy, a hamburger chef, to Ronald McDonald. Ironically enough, one of the most interesting facts about this mascot change that I've talked about before was the first Ronald McDonald to ever play Ronald McDonald was actually the actor who played Bozo for Washington WRC-TV. So this guy's name was Willard Scott, and he actually played this specific Bozo from 1959 to 1962. And this iteration of Ronald would be a bit different than the one we know now. The timing of Bozo growing in popularity to McDonald's switching over to a clown mascot that just so happened to have been Bozo at one point is pretty ironic and funny, and a very interesting clown coincidence. A coincidence?
Also, as much as Burger King likes to lie and say that they're anti-clown, they also tried to dip their toes in the clown advertising scheme, and they not only had clowns in their advertising, but they also sold at one point a lot of different clown merchandises. Like, they have a lot of fun stuff. Actually, I found these really cool clown cups on eBay I'll have to show you, but yeah, it wasn't just McDonald's, it wasn't just all these little mom and pop burger places or Jack in the Box. Burger King was trying to do it too, so don't let them get away with acting like they're too cool for clowns. They're not. It just didn't stick.
But just because of Ronald doesn't mean that the hamburger clown mascot stopped there, because around that time, Dee's Hamburgers in Utah would have their very own hamburger mascot and iconic clown sign. Dee's itself actually opened way back in 1932, but I was able to find that when they commissioned their iconic clown sign, this was in 1968. So it's possible that they had the clown before then, but we do know for sure at the very latest that Dee's implemented a clown mascot after McDonald's in 1968. But this clown was very unique and lovable, and so was its sign that we mentioned before. Dee's itself was also pretty well known, and they had many commercials too. They had all sorts of merchandise featuring their clown, which included stuff for kids, like a coloring book that included cartoons inside of the clown himself. Also, on the cover of the coloring book I found, there was someone dressed as the Dee's clown, so I'm curious to know if it's possible that at that time they even had an actor that played this clown as well, like Ronald McDonald was doing at the time. Following up Dee's in 1969, popular restaurant The Ground Round would have their own mascot named Bingo the Clown, and this was when they opened in Massachusetts. But as with most things clown related, Bingo fell out of popularity and died off to be a thing of the past, but many still remember him. Jumping forward to 1987 is my very favorite example of hamburger clowns, and that is the restaurant chain Lucky Piero in Japan. I find their businesses to be so cute, and they definitely were inspired by American culture. The restaurants inside have a sort of Applebee's type of vibe, if you've ever been there, specifically the older version of Applebee's. And the clown mascot itself is on all of their merchandise. It's also a statue outside of one of their locations, but I just think it's a really cool example of how clowns and hamburgers from the 50s to 60s ended up becoming a symbol of sorts for Americana, and that symbol itself would go on to inspire other types of media and works of fiction, and just the way that people see clowns abroad when they want to make American-themed things. Due to the popularity of clowns outside of America, I wouldn't be surprised if there's many other clown and hamburger businesses abroad besides the aforementioned Lucky Piero. I was actually able to find one in Mexico called Hamburger Clown, and I'm sure it can't be the only one out there, especially because Latin America has such a rich and wonderful history when it comes to clowning.
So if any of you actually know of any clown or hamburger joints in your town or in your country, I would love to know about them if they're not on this list. It was really hard to compile this timeline, so I would be overjoyed if you knew any other ones I could add. And obviously, since I'm in the United States, it was hard to even figure out if there were others out there, so I couldn't really find many examples. But I know they exist. They have to exist, right? So yeah, if you know any, let me know.
But back to the timeline, in 2001, Jesters would open in Illinois with a jester as a mascot. Jesters are still in the clown family, so I'm counting this one. But although that's really all I could find, I really doubt that is all that actually exists out there. There's definitely more, I just don't have eyes everywhere, although I wish I did.
But now that you know how clowns and hamburgers became one, we can talk about the caricatures of clown and hamburgers that pop up in media, which is really interesting and fun. I'm actually kind of excited for this part. This is a little more interesting than, I guess, the history of restaurants you guys probably don't care about. But I care about them, right? Okay? It's okay. But yeah, let's get into some fun clowns and hamburger media. Also, shout out to Big Top Burger. Do you guys like my hat?
Iconic 1988 movie Killer Clowns from Outer Space, there is a hamburger-themed restaurant called Big Top Burger, which is a parody of all the restaurants we've talked about before and fits perfectly with the overall clown theme. Following this, in 1989, Binky, the clown from Garfield, would also have his very own burger joint, Binky Burger. This would appear for the first time in the comic strip of June 1989. Binky himself, who is a parody of Bozo in the Garfield world, would also end up being indirectly one of those parodies of Ronald Mcdonald, so it makes sense he would follow suit and own a hamburger restaurant. There is also inspiration from Jack in the Box and their old clown speaker in some of the comic strips. In that same year of 1989, we would also see Krusty first appear in The Simpsons, but it wouldn't be until 1991 that Krusty Burgers would appear in the series. Much like Binky, Krusty himself is an amalgamation of many different clowns, mostly TV clowns, some of those inspirations being Rusty Nails and, of course, Bozo. But here is where we would really see a little bit of an evil spin on the hamburger clown, even more so than we did in a place like Killer Clowns, because in Killer Clowns, Big Top Burger really was just a hamburger joint, and Binky the Clown, he really isn't evil in this way, but Krusty, yeah, he's a pretty bad guy, so this is kind of where we see the tides turn. Jumping forward to 2007, a horror movie so terrible it's actually amazing would come out called Drive-Thru. This movie features a clown fast food place called Burger, which of course is very California, that has a clown mascot called, and yes, this is really his name, Horny the Clown. I won't spoil the movie, but basically a twisted and evil version of Horny starts murdering people. I think this movie is a great representation of the way that pop culture viewed clowns in the 2000s. Still suffering from bad press and publicity years earlier due to the likes of John Wayne Gacy and Pennywise, seeing popular evil clowns in the media was pretty normal, both fictional and non-fictional. And like Krusty that we mentioned before, he was also getting a lot of TV time. There was also something unique going on, which was the oversaturation of Ronald. He was literally everywhere. So that's why I think you get an interesting combination of stuff like in this movie, which if you love cheesy 2000s horror as much as I do, you should definitely check out. That same year, in 2007, Slushy the clown mascot of Mr. Slushyburger from Phineas and Ferb, would show up on TV. Slushy, who is another mixture of both Bozo and Ronald, would also parody the Big Boy statue, which is another American icon. 11 years later, in 2018, we would see another similar cartoon version of this with the TV show Big City Greens and their hamburger clown themed fast food place called Burger Clown. Much like other iterations of clowns and cartoons, Burger Clown himself would have red hair spaced apart on both sides, similar to Bozo, and the restaurant would be an homage to fast food itself. Funnily enough, the original McDonald's mascot, Speedy, had a hamburger head, and the Burger Clown mascot here does as well, except he's just also a clown. So it's kind of funny to think how many different steps in pop culture we had to take just to end up here. And 2 years later, in 2020, Big Top Burger would make a huge impact on clown media, bursting onto the YouTube scene. Not to be confused with the Big Top Burger from Killer Clowns in Outer Space, the creator, Ian Worthington, would note that the names and similarities of both Big Tops really was just a fun coincidence. This is actually a pretty clowny problem to have, because amongst clowns, we all take so much inspiration from similar sources. We do end up sometimes copying each other's work, but by accident. It's just something that happens naturally when you're inspired by similar media or similar things, like, for instance, clowns. But when it would come to the creation of Big Top Burger, it would be a really interesting journey on how it came to be. You see, Ian, the creator, would say that Pennywise had a huge impact on Big Top Burger, and he would actually draw the Tim Curry iteration often in his D&D comics. Originally, his idea started with pizza instead of burgers, which was a fun idea that Ian felt separated it from the popularity of SpongeBob and the Krusty Krab and clowns and burgers in general. So the original pitch to Netflix was called Fast Fools, and it changed to burgers instead of pizza, which I'm quite happy about because I get to mention it here. Also, low-key, although SpongeBob is not an actual clown and the Krusty Krab does not have a clown mascot, in a way it is kind of funny that SpongeBob is a clown and he is the mascot of Krusty Krab. But that's just me being clown-brained. Like, I just wanted to mention that.
But it is worth noting that Pennywise himself was like partially inspired by Bozo, and really just TV clowns in general and the popularity of clowns at that time. And it's really interesting to think of how actual clowns in pop culture were able to inspire so much different and interesting art and other forms of creativity. So it's just interesting. It's like really fun to think about. Maybe that's just me because I'm like the clown person, but I could like sit here and think about this forever. Like, maybe I'll stop it here so I don't literally sit here and think about it forever, but you get the idea. It really is crazy. Like, we wouldn't even really have Bozo if we didn't have such a fascination with the circus becoming more mainstream and ending up on our televisions. And at the time, Bozo was like one of many. So if Bozo never shot to popularity, there are like so many clowns in fiction that we would not have today, and we would probably have way less hamburger clowns. Interesting.
I do think it's pretty funny though, exactly how much credit Ronald McDonald gets for creating the merge between clowns and hamburgers when it was literally Jack in the Box and a handful of local businesses. You can definitely see the inspiration today, even in shows like the Amazing Digital Circus, which directly parody McDonald's. So I guess now when you want something fun to bring up at like dinner or something, you can say, well, Ronald wasn't the first hamburger clown.
So that about wraps up this entire video. The circus and its advertisements combined with children and television sort of married together to form this weird monster that became clowns and hamburgers. The satirical depictions of Ronald, burgers, and bozos will forever represent American culture in unique ways. Whether that's all the way in Japan or here in the United States, I hope you had fun learning about this interesting part of clown history. And I guess we can say that your order is ready. Bye! I hope you had fun cooking with me today. Because I cooked, get it? Bye. So you guys agreed that it was okay that I called you bouncers. So what's up, bouncers? Let's get into some clown history. Okay. Sorry, I just had to be a little awkward or it wouldn't be on brand, you know? We gotta keep it a little weird here. This is Olive. Wait, this is Olive. Hi, Olive. Say hi. She's my best friend, okay? That's my best friend. That's my best friend.